How has the transformation of telcos and the evolution from communication service providers to digital services providers been impacted by the ongoing pandemic and the resulting dramatic changes to online working? And what does this mean for 5G deployments and the growing support for disaggregated RAN solutions? Well, joining me now to discuss these issues are Gino Grano, who is Managing Senior Director at Red Hat, and Mota, who is CEO and Principal Analyst at ACG Research. Gino and Ray, good to see you both again.
Good to see you.
Hello, Guy.
I'd like to hear from both of you to start with on your observations from this current situation, this current global pandemic. How do you think CSPs have coped? Gino, let's go to you first.
It's been a tough time for a lot of the service providers in this global pandemic. They've been hit with significant changes that have been unprecedented, and some of them weren't very equipped in order to handle with them. If you think about what you get when you have a global pandemic, you have highly dense urban areas in which is the concentration of a lot of the workforce and people, all of a sudden getting smattered across to urban, suburban, even rural areas, right? So a lot of the bandwidth that was being consumed in these dense urban areas is now being consumed, across suburban, urban, and rural. And the peak performance of that bandwidth and the demand for that overall bandwidth has just been going absolutely through the roof, right? With everyone at home, with all our online presence increasing, with video collaboration, with online learning, increased content consumption and whatnot, there's just been a tremendous amount of increased bandwidth that's going on. And they've struggled to deal with that.
And Ray, what have you seen? What have your observations been? How do you think CSPs have coped?
Yeah, I think initially we have to talk about the macro outlook from the economy. And right now, if we look in North America, the region is projected to be down about 6% from a GDP point of view, right? And that's all the countries within the North America region. We do see that by 2021, it's projected to rebound a little bit to about 4%. But as Gino mentioned, we do see a lot of different things. Initially, the traffic patterns have changed from a corporate mindset to a more distributed remote worker aspects of it. We've seen the increase of VPNs and technologies like SD-WAN, because certain executives that really never worked from home, now it's becoming the new norm. And we've seen tremendous, almost triple digits increase on SD-WAN, where a lot of these corporations need to make sure that they meet compliancy from a security point of view and able to have connectivity across the board. So I think what's happening is that the challenge is that some service providers do have certain stress in the network. Now, it's funny how, we're in the telecom business and we've always known the importance of telecom, but I think people outside of our industry are finding out the importance of telecom, right? And a lot of governments are finding out the importance of telecom. But I think some of the parts that Gina was talking about, the challenges, some of those stress areas that needed to be addressed, needed to have, more visibility, more control, and more automation in order to do that. So I think there's some lessons being learned. And I think certain service providers are trying to move quickly because, some of us are just in this first wave from a global point of view. And if it happens in a second wave, how do we get more prepared? And what is the new norm? And how do we create an infrastructure to address this new norm?
So we're seeing an acceleration in connectivity solutions, Ray, but do you also think the current situation is impacting the journey from CSPs to the new digital services providers?
Yeah, I would say the short answer is yes, right? Absolutely, right? Because what's happened in a lot of cases is realize that, we're talking about technology, but when it talks about accelerating to a digital service provider, we have to talk about other parts of the organizations, from an operational and an organizational structure, and even a mindset when it gets to DSP. So I think initially we talk about having an environment for what we call a culture of innovation, right? Where creativity is encouraged and failure is somewhat tolerated, right? So that's the first layer of it, right? Then the other layer is kind of what we call embracing the ecosystem, where you have to find the right partners that give you an open environment and being able to accelerate across the board. Because we do see certain service providers or telcos that basically say they did automation, but what we see is certain silos of automation. So I think it's more than just a technology play. There needs to be an organizational, but then going into technology play, we do see a lot of service providers having to become what we call more nimble. How do they make the network have more control, more visibility, and adapt to this cloud-like environment across the board? So the short answer is yes.
And Gino, are you also hearing from your customers about the impact of the current situation, that they are accelerating plans to move from CSPs to DSPs?
That's a common theme amongst a lot of our customers. They're accelerating a lot of their digitization transformation across multiple areas. One, if you think about the impact that this global pandemic has had, just in how you service the customer, right? You no longer have stores, you don't have fronts where people can come in. You really need to rely on that digital interaction with your customer. A lot of customers had modernized that digital interface. A lot of customers are at different stages of that journey. And so they've really been working on accelerating that piece, both on the front end of dealing with customers, but also on the back end from a customer care perspective, and even for things such as delivery and self-installs, right? These are all areas that customers were investing on, but they've had to accelerate, right? The other thing that they've been focusing on from an acceleration standpoint is really the transformation of their network, right? And really the adoption of software-defined networks in order to help them deal with the transition of the hotspots within their network and being able to software allocate bandwidth in areas to be able to quickly adjust to bandwidth demands, different locations that have all been spurred on by the pandemic. Those are two of the major transformations that we're seeing in the industry amongst all the customers. And not to be lost on this is they're having to do this with less people. They don't have a lot of people in the buildings anymore. Everybody's at home. What typically could be done by folks with fingers on keyboards, et cetera, really they've had to sought a way of transforming the way in which they deploy capacity, the way in which they automate their entire process, not only the physical, but also the logical and the workflows that there. So those are a lot of the trends that we're seeing.
And Gino, I suppose there's been a huge broad spectrum of preparedness in this situation, from those who are very prepared to those who are really a lot less prepared. How can Red Hat help those who have been less prepared?
Really, we've had the good fortune of working with a lot of those folks that are in the early stage of adoption and have been down this journey for a long time. We've learned a lot of lessons, that Ray was talking about, and we're very prepared to come and help with, as much or as little as folks need. Whether it's the modernization of that application and working with the customers to help understand and develop a CI/CD pipeline that looks for them, to adopting a cloud-native architecture, to helping them transform not only their application, but take into consideration the impact on the people and the processes within the organization and how you can move forward with that. These are all things that you need to consider on how you're moving into that cloud-native infrastructure and working with that forward. And plus, how do you want to deploy this cloud-native infrastructure? Is this something that you want to do on a public or private cloud? Do you want to adopt a hybrid cloud strategy? Right? From Red Hat's perspective, we are a firm believer in the hybrid cloud strategy, and we want to help enable our customers be able to run their applications in a cloud-native form in any cloud that they're looking for. Right? And they will determine what makes sense for them in that perspective. So we're prepared to help with that modernization of applications, the movement to a hybrid cloud, and the automation of that entire process.
And Ray, this transformation, this evolution is underpinning much of 5G. How are the open architectures and environments of O-RAN and vRAN going to accelerate this journey and also improve the economics of 5G?
Yeah, that's an important question, Guy. I think initially, maybe for clarification, part two is realize that vRAN is actually part of Open RAN, right? In a lot of situations. But you bring up the point that I always tell some mobile operators is that in a lot of cases, their business case for 5G isn't quite clear yet. right? What they're doing is, in many cases, is they're reacting and building these services, right? Because they want to maintain customers. They're afraid of customer attrition, but they're identifying certain areas where there's certain verticals where they can see a need in that area. So that part's improving a little bit. But what happened is, because some of the business cases aren't clear, at least from the consumer side, where the ARPUs are going to stay somewhat the same, they need to focus on delivering the service with operational efficiency, right? And when you look at things like Open RAN, for instance, it does a lot of things, right? From the standpoint of disaggregating the radio, where you use white boxes and you're not locked into, let's say, to the typical 3 vendors. It reduces the cost of the BBU licensing. And we've done a tremendous amount of business modeling for Red Hat and others, where we've worked with some tier ones, and we've seen almost up to about 44% TCO savings, right? When you look at different things of onboarding and different things on how you handle spectrum in that area. So I think moving forward, right, if you're a service provider, you need to start investigating the areas to say, if it's vRAN, right, look at my current mode of operations, because I talked earlier about removing silos of automation. And the first area that we see that they could gain some efficiency is what we see is a lot of service providers is they have these silos. They have an NFVI stack for EPC, an NFVI stack for IMS. In some cases, we've seen where they have 6 NFVI stack, and they need to move more to a horizontal approach, where they can then have more of what we call a centralized control, where the service is agnostic of the network, right? And I think when they do that, whether we get into a second wave and all that, they start becoming more of a true telco cloud. And I think Open RAN, if you're not looking into it, is something that every mobile operator should consider right now.
Great. And Gino, do you also see that Open RAN and the virtual RAN is able to accelerate this transformation towards 5G and do it in a more cost-effective way and with lower TCO?
The beauty of Open RAN is that it's underpinned by open source technologies, right? So you're leveraging the power and the innovation of the communities, right? With that, you are accelerating a lot of the feature development. So the fact that you're moving to that, you should be able to take advantage of the features and functionalities that the community in general is developing. So we do see, as you looking to adopt an infrastructure that is based on open technologies, you are going to quicken your pace to market. You are going to get to a lot of those services at the edge to be able to deliver to your customers, to hold on to your customers, to diminish the attrition that could happen, et cetera. So this is a vital underpinning thing that Red Hat is completely focused on, right? We want to be able to help our customers leverage open source technologies, not only at the core, but all the way down to the edge.
Gino, thank you. And Ray, thank you both very much indeed for joining us on the program today and sharing your views.
Thank you, Guy.
Thank you.